There's a quiet snap that happens inside a man, not from what she says but from the silence that follows. That silence isn't empty, it's loud with truth. You can clutch every explanation, replay every memory, and still the hollow answers come from a missing reply. You poured yourself out and the echo you heard back was absence. That moment burns sharper than any argument because it reveals what you were really giving. Time, attention, proof, and none of it was chosen. You realize, suddenly and without ceremony, that effort can't demand respect. The realization isn't dramatic. It's a precise cut that wakes you. You look at your messages and they read like confessions to a ghost. You remember the nights you stayed up drafting the perfect text, the calls you returned immediately, the sacrifices nobody noticed. You begin to see the pattern. This is your wake-up call, brother. Gratitude doesn't follow obligation. Presence isn't rewarded simply because it exists. There's clarity in that silence. It's a mirror showing you the truth about boundaries you never set. When a man keeps explaining, he teaches people that his center is negotiable. When he keeps chasing, he trains others to expect his availability. This is not about pride, it's about learning the economy of your own energy. You have a scarce commodity, your attention. Spend it wisely. That void is a lesson disguised as rejection. It forces a question. Who are you when no one applauds you? If your worth depends on someone else's response, you have built your identity on sand. But if you can still stand when the applause dies, you have built on rock. The silence strips away the stories you told yourself. It shows what was real and what was theater. The sting of being unseen sharpens your senses. You stop confusing action with value. You stop equating busyness for meaning. The man who finally notices this stops polishing explanations and starts sharpening standards. He stops lowering his price to win temporary attention. He begins to understand that being wanted and being needed are not the same currency. Silence teaches restraint. It teaches that sometimes walking away is louder than 1,000 pleas. You learn to let absence carry the message begging never could. Your peace is not for sale. The space you create becomes a test of its own, not a weapon but an honest statement. I will not abandon myself. At first, the quiet feels like defeat. Pride aches. There's loneliness in the rawness. But that discomfort is the kiln where discipline forms. You either fracture or you forge. If you choose forging, you begin to fill the inside with meaning that does not rely on external validation. You cultivate work, routines, friendships, purpose. You refill your cup with things that don't vanish with a text. The flip is simple and brutal. Stop chasing what avoids you. Redirect your energy into what builds you. Let silence be the teacher that shows you where you were weak and then use it to build strength. That snap becomes the pivot. Not the end of desire, the end of desperation. And from that end, a new kind of attraction, slow, steady, unbiddable, begins to grow. Energy beats effort every time. You can schedule grand gestures and memorize the perfect apologies, but none of that matters if your presence feels frantic. People don't crave explanations, they register vibration. How you move through your day communicates more than any apology ever could. Calmness signals sufficiency. Hurry signals lack. Stop confusing motion for momentum. Doing more doesn't equal becoming more. The man who floods his calendar with favors for validation is selling out his future for a moment of attention. Value accumulates through consistency, not emergency acts. Long-term worth is built in habits, not in emotional sprints. Presence is measured, not claimed. You can't declare yourself steady and expect others to believe it when your actions shout. You give until there's nothing left to offer and somehow expect gratitude in return. That's the trap. Generosity without selection becomes self-erasure. When every door you open welcomes the same guests, you teach them to take for granted the keys. There is a difference between deliberate generosity and desperate appeasement. One strengthens your character, the other bankrupts your dignity. Men who confuse the two learn the lesson slowly, usually after the cost becomes obvious. They trade long-term respect for short-term comfort. Watch what your consistency teaches. If you always rearrange your life around someone else's mood, you normalize your availability. Normal becomes expected. Expected becomes demanded. Suddenly your patience is no longer a virtue but a liability others exploit. Giving without reciprocal choice is a soft surrender. It signals that your identity can be altered by applause or silence. That malleability invites more tests and fewer commitments. The person on the receiving end learns that accountability is optional, and they act accordingly. This erosion is rarely theatrical. It arrives in small increments, taking your call less often, assuming favors without asking, sliding past promises with excuses. Each omission chips away at your worth until the only thing left is habit. Don't confuse habit for affection. Reclaiming yourself starts by auditing your contributions. Name where you expend time, money, or emotional labor that returns nothing vital. Be ruthless. Some investments pay compound interest, others are write-offs. Cut the latter without apology. Saying no is a statement of taste. It tells the world what you hold sacred and what you will not subsidize. Boundaries are tastefully applied limits, not grand gestures. They preserve your bandwidth for what matters and remove the bleed that transforms strength into servitude. Learn the math of exchange. Relationships thrive when value flows both ways. If receipts keep arriving from your side only, the ledger is unbalanced. That imbalance breeds resentment, then contempt. Prevent that dissent by aligning contribution with reciprocation. Pride isn't the enemy, depletion is. There's a dignified refusal to collapse into someone else's life script. Choosing to withhold affection until it's mutually earned is not cruelty, it is maintenance. You protect the engine that allows you to show up with generosity means something. Notice how quickly respect follows clarity. When you stop being an easy option, others must decide whether you're worthy of effort. Some will leave. That's health. The ones who stay begin to show up because they want to, not because habit coerced them into it. Generosity that costs you your core is ineffective. It creates a false currency that buys temporary approval but never yields loyalty. Real giving grows from abundance, not from scarcity. If you're exhausted by giving, the root problem isn't generosity, it's misallocation. This reallocation requires courage. People will test the new standard. They will push until you fold. When you don't, your boundaries harden into a new architecture of respect. Your life fills with collaborators, not takers. Your time becomes precious again. The final irony: when you stop leaking yourself into unreciprocated drains, your capacity to give multiplies. Your love becomes cleaner, stronger, more meaningful. You no longer gift out of emptiness. You choose to give because there is plenty to spare. That is true abundance for good. Distance can be a question, not always a rejection. A sudden coolness is often an experiment, an attempt to see if you hold steady when tides shift. People don't always withdraw to punish. Sometimes they pull back to measure strength. Your response tells the whole story. Do you tighten or do you remain composed? Tests arrive disguised as silence, sharp words, or disappearing acts. They aren't mysteries to decode, they are gauges for durability. Someone who cares enough to test is checking whether your core is movable. If you flinch, you reveal the fault line. If you stand unmoved, you rewrite the terms of the game. Recognize manipulation from modulation. Not every emotional withdrawal is a setup. Some distance is personal processing, stress, or fear. Assume neither villain nor saint. Observe, don't dramatize. Emotional volatility is a climate. Your job is to be a stable structure inside it. Reacting gives power away. A rushed apology, an explaining text, an anxious justification. These are currencies spent carrying someone else's uncertainty. With each immediate concession, you confirm the belief that your center is negotiable. Pause. Take inventory before you respond. Tests are tiny invitations to show resilience. They offer a chance to prove you can contain chaos without being consumed. When you fail, you teach repetition. When you succeed, you change trajectories. Small victories compound into a reputation for steadiness that precedes you. People test boundaries to find their edges. If you let them erode you with every trial, you will be worn thin. Set limits that are simple and enforceable. Clarity is kindness. A clear line reduces unnecessary retesting and preserves your ability to be generous intentionally. Don't weaponize your calm. Holding your ground is not the same as inflicting suffering. The difference is motive. Maintain composure to preserve dignity, not to score points. Lead with integrity and the message lands as maturity, not manipulation. Understand timing. Sometimes the most powerful reply is quiet presence, going about the work that builds your life. The noise of reaction will fade, the hum of consistent progress will remain. People notice patterns more than single events. Ask what the test reveals about them, not just about you. A pattern of repeated checks signals insecurity or habit. Occasional probing can be curiosity. Track frequency. Let pattern, not one episode, inform decisions. Keep a simple protocol for when tests happen. Breathe, assess, act. Don't override instincts with panic. Use discipline over impulse. Respond in a way that aligns with long-term aims, not short-term relief. Discipline compounds into credibility. If someone is using tests to control behavior rather than reveal compatibility, cut ties. Compatibility is not about proving yourself daily, it's about mutual safety. You want a partner who trusts without constant proof, not one who demands ritual submissions. Tests are also invitations to hold space for someone's vulnerability. Sometimes the pullback is not power play but fear. When fear is the cause, patience combined with firm boundaries can foster healing. Choose generosity intelligently, not reflexively. Every test you pass widens the radius of your influence. You become a place people gravitate toward when storms come. That role is earned not by ego but by quiet consistency. Build that reputation and the nature of interactions around you will begin to shift. Holding back isn't cruelty, it's a declaration of value. You don't withdraw to wound, you withhold to define. When you remove yourself from a cycle of pleading, you clarify what behavior will be tolerated. Absence becomes a form of instruction. It trains others to meet you where you stand. There is precision in restraint. It's not about playing games or emotional scorekeeping. It's about pruning your life so only the contributions that uplift remain. You stop trading dignity for attention. You stop subsidizing relationships that consume your momentum. Withholding creates space for perspective. When you stop reacting immediately, patterns become visible. The person across from you either rises to the expectation or reveals their limitations. That outcome is information, not punishment. Use it to decide whether to stay engaged or to redirect your energy elsewhere. Not showing up on demand forces choice. People who value you will step forward. Those who only took advantage will drift. This is the economy of reciprocity in action. Scarcity teaches value. If your presence is effortless to obtain, its price collapses. There is a moral clarity to restraint. It prevents the slow corrosion that comes from being always on for someone who remains off-grid emotionally. You protect your nervous system by not answering every call for rescue. You conserve the bandwidth needed to perform at your highest level. Holdbacks are corrective, not vindictive. When you stop rescuing someone from their consequences, you create real incentives for responsibility. Let natural outcomes teach lessons that lectures cannot. People learn more from the consequences of choices than from words about how they should behave. This approach is humble and strong at once. It refuses drama without denying care. You maintain standards while remaining available for the right kind of connection. Hearts can respond to consistency, they rarely respond to panic. Practice the art of strategic non-engagement. If a relationship creates repeated chaos, opt out of the chaos. You can still care without collapsing into caretaking. Preserve your functionality and allow others to manage their own lives. Silence as a boundary signals self-possession. It says, I am not your emergency kit. I am a person with priorities. When you reinforce that with actions, the message stops sounding like punishment and starts sounding like truth. Expect tests. Expect people to push until you fold. When you don't, their behavior often changes because they must adjust to the new reality. That's part of the work, reshaping expectations by changing the inputs into the system. Remember, withholding is not forever unless the relationship is irreparable. It can be a reset. It can be a recalibration that restores balance. If someone responds by showing up authentically, you can re-engage with clearer terms. If they don't, you have saved yourself from future depletion. Finally, understand the paradox. The more you refuse to be used, the more usable you become to the right person. Strength attracts not because it intimidates but because it promises safety. Your restraint isn't a tactic, it's a signal. You are whole without them, available with them on condition of respect. Stand by your limits until they become the new normal. When that happens, relationships either align with your truth or they reveal themselves as unsuitable and fall away quietly. Desire is a chemical conversation, not a checklist. You don't manufacture longing by ticking boxes. You create contrast. Heat grows where scarcity meets availability, where calm collides with intensity. When everything is given at once, nothing feels rare. Stop auditioning for approval. Performance is loud and obvious. It asks for a report card. Polarity is quieter. It invites curiosity. If you perform, you set a predictable rhythm. If you cultivate contrast, you set a tension that pulls people forward to find out more. Think in tones, not tasks. The way you enter a room, the pace of your replies, the steadiness of your voice, these are instruments. Play them with intention. A steady tempo with unexpected accents keeps attention. A constant barrage flattens interest. Need dulls desire. Urgency tells others you exist in deficit. Composure sends a different message. You have reserves. People who sense abundance are drawn because abundance promises less drama and more stability. That promise is magnetic. Make mystery your ally. Reveal enough to connect, but hold enough back to be intriguing. Full disclosure on day one removes the curiosity that creates pursuit. A measured self-disclosure rhythm invites investment instead of entitlement. Polarity thrives on distinction. Masculine and feminine energies, however you label them, feed on difference. When one person stabilizes and the other flows, chemistry happens. If both people overcorrect in the same direction, both frantic or both aloof, the dynamic collapses into stagnation. Your presence should be an offering, not a surrender. Show up with intention. Be generous where it counts, reserved where it sustains you. That balance signals that you choose connection, rather than needing it to feel whole. Stop converting your worth into explanations. Performances require justification. Polarity requires no apology. Move with the certainty that your value does not need footnotes. When you occupy that truth, others instinctively reassess how they relate to you. Timing is a language. Deliberate pauses, selective availability, and calm decision-making speak in ways words cannot. Use these pauses to set rhythm, not to punish. Rhythm creates anticipation. Punishment creates resentment. Physicality matters. The way you carry yourself transmits status long before you speak. Posture, eye contact, simple gestures. These register at a primal level. Adjust the body and the mind follows. Make your frame match the story you want to tell. Contrast is not manipulation when it's authentic. It's a natural consequence of living a full life. When your days are occupied by purpose, the emotional temperature between you and others finds its own peaks and valleys. That dynamic is sustainable because it's rooted in reality. Cultivate inner work that produces outer calm. Emotional training, managing impulses, refining reactions, building routines, pays dividends in attraction. People are drawn to the person who can hold steady under pressure because they feel safe enough to show themselves. Remember, polarity is a relationship climate, not a script. It's not about playing games for rewards. It's about embodying a centeredness that invites others to move around you. When you become that anchor, attraction stops being something you chase and starts being something that naturally occurs. You used to chase answers from outside yourself, measuring worth in reactions. That habit is expensive. Trading your inner scorecard for someone else's applause leaves you hollow. The first step is to stop outsourcing approval. When you begin to supply your own validation, everything else loosens its grip. Make competence your currency. Do the work that builds skill and stops needing commentary. Small wins compound into a steady backbone. Practiced excellence is quieter than pleading and louder than promises. When your competence speaks, you no longer beg for attention. Create rituals that anchor you. Mornings that are non-negotiable, workouts that sharpen focus, hours of uninterrupted labor. These are the scaffolding for confidence. Rituals create identity. They tell you who you are before anyone else gets a vote. Replace explanation with output. Words ask for permission. Results demand respect. Finish projects, ship content, build things that outlast conversation. The man who produces is harder to ignore because his life declares priorities without begging for approval. Stop measuring worth by likes or replies. External metrics are fickle and rarely meaningful. Measure by depth. Depth of craft, depth of friendships, depth of presence. Those metrics are far more reliable. Learn to love solitude as a tool, not a punishment. Solitude reveals whether your company is sufficient. In that space you practice being full. Develop hobbies, interests, a curiosity muscle. A person with a life is not hollow to fill. He is whole to share. Emotionally invest in yourself first. Therapy, reading, honest self-reflection. These are investments that pay interest. Fix the inside and the outside rearranges. Growth that comes from self-work radiates in ways words cannot fake. Guard your attention like capital. Where you spend minutes defines where you bank value. Cut out time drains that demand constant returns. Keep people and tasks that compound. Clarity protects your reserve and forces others to earn access. Talk less about intent and more about results. Intent without follow-through is an empty promise. When actions align with aims, trust forms. Trust is the currency that builds loyalty and dissolves neediness. Surround yourself with those who amplify, not deplete. Communities mirror the energy you carry. Choose peers who push you toward craft, discipline, and higher standards. Bad company rehearses insecurity, good company rehearses excellence. Practice discomfort deliberately. Say no when it hurts, show up when you'd rather avoid, and tolerate boredom in pursuit of gains. Discipline forged in discomfort becomes a shield against impulsive validation seeking. Celebrate small sovereignty. Every time you act without needing external proof, you add a stone to your foundation. Those moments stack until the structure is undeniable. Pride in private is the kind that stabilizes public life. Remove rescue as a reflex. Stop leaping to fix emotional emergencies that are not yours to repair. Offer presence when appropriate, but don't exchange your peace for temporary relief. Boundaries are a form of generosity that endures. Finally, make your life a magnet not by chasing attraction, but by being worth attracting. Work, character, and purposeful solitude combine into an energy people notice. Self-sourced men create their own gravity. Keep refining in silence, measure growth privately, and let results announce you. Over time your independence becomes the standard others must meet to deserve it. The moment you stop selling yourself to whoever shows interest, your selection standards sharpen. You no longer accept emotional volatility as the price of intimacy. The people who value stability rise to the surface. The ones who need drama fall away like dead leaves. When your life stops orbiting other people's moods, you begin to attract partners who actually fit your rhythm. Refuse to confuse availability with commitment. Too many men equate constant presence with being chosen. That confusion invites casual consumption. The correct response is to expect proportionality, investment that mirrors what you give. If someone cannot match your pace, they simply don't belong in the same lane. Hunt for patterns, not excuses. Single incidents are noise, repeated behaviors are evidence. Look for consistent follow-through, not clever explanations. If apologies become a frequent substitute for change, the relationship is built on promises, not practice. Choose practice every time. Guard your emotional thresholds. Tolerance has a boundary, generosity has a limit. When you keep bending without repair, you teach others that your shape is negotiable. Stop pretending endurance is a virtue when it mutes your voice. Honor your limits by enforcing them. Value alignment matters more than chemistry. Wild attraction can feel intoxicating, but without shared goals and mutual respect, it erodes. Seek someone whose ambitions, rhythms, and moral code fit close enough to build a shared life. Compatibility is logistics plus character. Don't romanticize frantic energy as depth. Don't settle for potential as a placeholder. Dreams are useful, but future promises are not evidence of present reliability. A person saying they'll change next year is not the same as someone who shows change today. Invest where results appear consistently. Let consequences teach instead of constant rescue. Repeatedly bailing someone out trains irresponsibility. When you allow natural outcomes, you create pressure for accountability. That pressure can catalyze growth or reveal incompatibility sooner. Either result saves you time and heartbreak. Keep standards simple and communicable. Vague expectations lead to passive frustration. State what matters clearly, observe behavior, then act accordingly. People respond best to defined terms. Ambiguity favors those who take advantage. Watch basics: punctuality, honesty, follow-through, emotional responsibility. If those are missing, deeper compatibility is unlikely. Use early checks to avoid long, expensive misinvestments. Surround yourself with models that work. Friends who practice steady boundaries provide reference points. Study their systems and borrow what serves your growth. Accept that some departures are relief, not loss. When someone exits because they won't meet your standards, feel less rejection and more liberation. Losing a misfit clears bandwidth for someone aligned. Grieve briefly, then reallocate your attention to growth. Be patient with alignment. Finding someone who complements your life is a process. Resist the pressure to fill gaps quickly. Time weeds out false matches and grows the ones that matter. Finally, filtering is responsibility. You create conditions where real partnership can form. By holding the line, you protect your capacity to love well and consistently. That discipline converts scarcity into abundance, not of options but of right ones. Be unapologetic about raising standards. The right partner will respect what you protect and will show up willingly. In time, your clarity saves you from cycles, leaving room for calm, durable connection to grow. Stability is the quiet skeleton of lasting love. It doesn't flash or shout, it carries weight. When someone is steady, they make space for depth. Intensity fades, but reliability accumulates. The couple who survives the small collapses builds a foundation that survives the big ones. Predictability and kindness matters. Small repeated gestures matter more than grand declarations. Consistent care becomes a language that says, "I will be here," without dramatics. That reliability breeds trust, and trust is the fertilizer for intimacy. Emotional safety isn't soft, it's earned. People risk openness when they know the other person won't weaponize their vulnerability. The brave thing is to stay even when the edges fray. That refusal to escalate creates a container large enough for true sharing. Boundaries and tenderness coexist. Strength without warmth looks like coldness. Warmth without firmness looks like drift. The balance between the two is what allows partners to relax and reveal themselves without fear. When both sides hold this balance, the relationship becomes a sanctuary rather than a stage. Commitment is practiced, not proclaimed. You demonstrate it through routine, showing up when it's hard, keeping promises small and large, and choosing daily acts that compound into fidelity. Rituals don't have to be romantic to be meaningful, they simply have to be reliable. Conflict becomes a system, not chaos. Stable relationships don't avoid fights, they manage them. People learn methods of repair that aren't performative. Apologies are specific, adjustments are concrete, and the aim is to restore equilibrium, not win a point. Growth is mutual when rooted in steadiness. Each partner can evolve because the base of safety supports risk-taking. You take career chances, you try therapy, you change patterns, because your partner is the steady backdrop that makes experimentation survivable. Intimacy matures from curiosity, not possession. Long-term closeness comes from genuine interest in who the other person is over time. Ask questions that probe changes, listen to answers without judgment, and treat evolution as part of the contract, not a betrayal. Trust multiplies through predictability. When someone consistently aligns words with actions, suspicion loses its foothold. That consistency reduces drama and replaces it with a calm competence that becomes attractive in its own right. Care is not constant adrenaline, it's maintenance. You do the small, mundane things that keep the engine running. Check-ins, shared chores, punctuality, and follow-through. These practical acts are the scaffolding of a life that can carry love without burning it out. Stability attracts responsibility. When you are reliable, you invite deeper commitments because others feel safe enough to invest. People who fear volatility hoard distance. People who feel steadiness lean in, bringing resources, time, and emotional bandwidth. Security isn't complacency. It requires active tending, communication, curiosity, and consistent standards. It demands that you correct drift early, not let resentments harden. The care you give to maintenance is the same care that keeps desire alive. Finally, steady love frees you. It replaces the frantic hunt for proof with a settled confidence. You worry less about proving worth and more about building a life. That shift, from performance to partnership, is where the kind of love that lasts actually grows. Choose such constancy and you create an environment where tenderness can deepen into something meaningful and enduring. Mastery begins when you refuse to let emotion dictate decisions. You stop reacting for approval and start responding from a steady center. That change is radical because it severs the puppet strings that once pulled your life. Control yourself before chasing outcomes. Emotional sovereignty is feeling the impulse and choosing differently. Being the steward of your inner state makes behavior intentional instead of reactive. Discard scripts that demand justification. Men who explain constantly trade autonomy for temporary pity. Leadership shows in what you build, not in defenses. Let results speak. They make excuses irrelevant. Growth requires blunt honesty. Own your mistakes without melodrama. Accountability fuels improvement. Naming failure breaks the cycle and opens room for practical progress. Train discipline until it becomes habit. Create routines, movement, work, study, that reinforce dignity. Repetition shapes identity. Who you are emerges from what you do repeatedly, not from what you say. Hold your story lightly. One loss does not define you. Treat past errors as data, not fate. Use that data to choose wiser actions next time. Sovereignty and kindness coexist. Being self-governed is not a license for coldness. Care without dependency is possible. You can be soft and resolute, tender with others, strict with yourself. Invest in skill over approval. Competence compounds. Focus on craft and let success attract notice. Mastery draws respect without bargaining for attention. Protect your peace with systems, not moods. Habits stabilize you when external noise tries to sway you. Built-in structure makes serenity dependable. Use boundaries to teach, not punish. Consistent limits educate faster than emotional pleas. When you enforce lines calmly, people learn how to engage with you responsibly. Treat solitude as practice. Alone time proves you can stand without applause. It clarifies priorities and reveals projects worth your energy. Solitude refines judgment and fuels purpose. Celebrate progress discreetly. Internal validation endures longer than public praise. Mark wins privately and keep momentum without performing. Adopt a long view. Instant payoff erodes character. Men who embrace delayed reward build lasting assets. Patience signals depth. Stop bargaining for love. Relationships that demand constant proving are unstable. Insist on reciprocity. Partnership requires mutual investment that preserves dignity. Lead by example. Behavior is contagious. Show steadiness and others mirror it. Demonstrate accountability and you invite responsibility. Choose sovereignty to expand your life. Governing your inner world frees time and focus for creation. Stop shrinking for others' validation. Become someone worth meeting on equal ground. That is readiness, not arrogance. Build rather than beg, craft rather than plead, love from abundance, not from lack. Set clear small practices, a weekly plan that protects work blocks, a nightly shutdown ritual, a morning that begins with movement. These guardrails hold you steady. Make language precise. Replace vague complaints with specific requests. Say where you need help, what you expect, and the consequence for inaction. Clarity reduces confusion and enables accountability. Refuse to be the emotional emergency service. Offer presence when it heals, but do not become a go-to for unresolved personal issues. Let others manage what belongs to them. Finally, remember this is daily discipline. Sovereignty appears in small choices. Who you answer, what you defend, where you invest time. Those choices compound until you become undeniable. Your life will follow the standards you set. Your life will follow the standards you set, so raise them, live by them, and let your silence prove your strength. If this message hit you deep, subscribe, More truth, more power, more clarity is coming.